In this section of the 2024 Malawi Demographic and Healthy Survey, we focus on housing characteristics, household population and access to water, sanitation and hygiene, all crucial to understanding daily life and well-being across Malawi. Housing characteristics. Electricity access. Access to electricity remains limited in Malawi. Nationally, only 16% of the population has access to electricity. There is a stark contrast between urban and rural areas. 60% of urban residents have electricity, compared to just 8% in rural communities. Clean fuels and technologies. The use of clean fuels varies significantly by purpose. For cooking, only 2% of the population uses clean fuels such as electricity, gas or improved stoves, with 9% in urban areas and less than 1% in rural areas. Most households still rely on traditional fuels like wood or charcoal for cooking. However, for lighting, the picture is much more positive. 94% of the population uses clean fuels and technologies, with similar rates across urban, 91% and 94% in rural areas. Information and communication technology. In terms of technology ownership, mobile phones are the most common, owned by 65% of households, 87% in urban areas and 61% in rural areas. Radio ownership stands at 27%, 47% urban, 24% rural. Television ownership is 11% overall, 42% urban, 6% rural, while computer ownership remains low as just 2%, 9% urban, 1% rural. Means of transportation. Bicycles are the most common means of transportation, owned by 30% of households. Interestingly, bicycle ownership is higher in rural areas, 31%, than urban areas, 22%. Motorcycle or scooter ownership is at 5% across all areas. Car or truck ownership is only 3% nationally, but reaches 10% in urban areas compared to just 1% in rural areas. Wealth Index. The Wealth Index helps us understand economic disparities.
Wealth is determined by scoring households based on characteristics including access to electricity and ownership of various consumer goods.
Households are then ranked from lowest to highest score, and the list is separated into 5 equal pieces or quintiles, each representing 20% of the population. Therefore, those in the highest quintile may not be rich, but they are of higher socioeconomic status than 80% of the country. The data reveals significant disparities. Rural areas have the highest proportion of the households in the lowest wealth quintile at 23%. In contrast, urban areas have the highest proportion in the highest quintile at 77%. Household population. Now let us look at the people inside these homes. Population demographics. Malawi has a young population. 45% are under age 15. The average household size is 4.2 members. Also notable, 38% of households are headed by women, reflecting an important social dynamic in Malawian society. Orphanhood. Orphanhood remains a concern in Malawi. 9% of children under age 18 have lost one or both parents. This rate is consistent across the country, 9% in urban areas and 9% in rural areas. Birth registration. Birth registration shows progress. Among children under age 5, 35% are registered and have a birth certificate, while another 44% are registered but do not have a certificate. This means 79% of children have some form of registration. However, 22% of children remain unregistered. Registration rates are similar for males and females. Primary school attendance is high at 90% nationally, 88% in urban areas and 91% in rural areas. However, Secondary school attendance drops significantly to just 16% overall. There is a large urban-rural gap at the secondary level. 39% of urban youth attend secondary school compared to only 12% in rural areas. In terms of gender parity, girls are doing well. For every 100 boys in primary school, there are 102 girls. In secondary school, this rises to 132 girls for every 100 boys, indicating strong female participation at higher levels of education. Water, sanitation and hygiene. Drinking water service. Access to drinking water is improving. Nationally, 73% of the population has at least basic drinking water service. Urban areas have significantly higher coverage at 93% compared to 69% in rural areas. By region, access to basic drinking water service ranges from 66% in the northern region to 72% in the central region and 75% in the southern region. Availability of sufficient water. Regarding sufficient quantities of drinking water, 77% of households reported having enough water in the last month. This rate is similar across urban, 76% and 77% in rural areas. Sanitation services. Sanitation access is measured using service ladder. Nationally, 40% of households have at least a basic sanitation service, 29% have limited service, 26% have unimproved facilities, and 5% still practice open defecation. There are clear disparities by residents. In urban areas, 44% have at least basic service and only 1% practice open defecation. In rural areas, 40% have basic service, but 6% practice open defecation. Management of household excreta. Looking at how household excreta is managed, 68% of households safely dispose of excreta from on-site sanitation facilities. However, 31% lack appropriate management of household excreta. Safe management of household excreta is strongly linked to wealth. Among the poorest households, only 53% have safe excreta management. This increases steadily with wealth, 62% for the second quintile, 66% for the middle, 74% for the fourth, and 84% for the wealthiest households. Hand washing facilities. Hand washing facilities with soap and water are not yet widely available. Only 12% of households have a hand washing facility on premises with soap and water. Urban areas have higher coverage at 22% compared to just 10% in rural areas. Menstrual hygiene. Finally, regarding menstrual hygiene, among women aged 15 to 49 who were at home during their last menstrual period, 92% reported being able to wash and change in privacy and having access to appropriate materials. This is relatively high across all areas, 96% in urban areas and 91% in rural areas. E. coli quality of drinking water by residents. Households were also selected for water quality testing to assess the presence of bacterium E. coli, which may indicate water and environment contamination. Among the population with E. coli in water collected in the household, the national coverage is 75%. In urban areas, 43% have E. coli in their drinking water. In rural areas, 80% have E. coli in their drinking water. E. coli safely managed drinking water by residents. Among the population with drinking water free from fecal contamination and available when needed, the national is only 9%. In urban areas, 34% have safely managed drinking water. In rural areas, only 4% have safely managed drinking water. This concludes Section 2 of the 2024 Malawi Demographic and Health Survey presentation covering household characteristics, household population, and water, sanitation and hygiene. The data highlights both progress and continued challenges, with notable disparities between urban and rural areas across wealth groups.